trusted a man to fully take care of her. Like, although her husband, she still built her own while in the marriage. Hey, guys, I love documentaries, and sometimes I just feel like I need to share it somewhere. So we're just gonna just roll with me, okay? The first one I'm doing is about the documentary Martha that can be found on Netflix. Why did I even press play on Martha? I think because of my age, I remember seeing Martha on TV, in multiple areas of TV. I remember her magazines, and I remember this lady going to jail. Like, I remember all of Martha, most of Martha. Martha has been a part of my life for a long time, and I didn't even realize it. So, yeah, I'm about to play it and see what's going on with Martha Stewart. So I have notes because I watched it twice. So I have notes, and we're going to go through with a little bit of a therapist perspective, because even by the end I was looking at her life, and I was like, and now the second time I'm watching it with my license, I'm like, whoa, Martha girl, we got some things to talk about. I seriously hope Martha is in therapy. I do. I know that she's a woman of a certain age and from a certain time, but I really hope that she speaks to a therapist about herself and her experiences. Okay. If Martha has a book, I also probably want to read that, because I want to know more about her young life. I feel like we glazed over it. And I feel like there was more, either that was more romanticized in her life in this documentary, or she just chose not to cover it. But let's get into what she did cover. So, let me turn to the first page of my notes. Okay, hopefully this is shorter than I think it's going to be. So first, we start out with we very early in the documentary hearing about Martha's love for her father, and how she feels like she was his favorite because he was a perfectionist and she was also a perfectionist. Um, and none of the other kids had that trait, I guess. And then here's another realization. Okay. So then what I realized is that we didn't hear much about her mom. Like, we heard about her dad, we heard about all these things, but not much about her mom. We know that her mom was a teacher, and we know that her mom had a lot of kids, 5, and we know that her mom knew how to cook and entertain, and that her mom was there on her wedding day. Those are the things we know about Martha's mother. Oh, and we also know that Martha's mom probably was not the most lovey-dovey person, and probably could have hugged Martha more. That's what we know from this documentary. Mm-hmm. But we hear about the dad's character. We hear about him being unemployed. Okay, after failing as a salesperson, we hear about him drinking coffee and wine in the morning before work, about him being unhappy, and all these things. Oh, and about him smacking her. Okay, when she said she wanted to marry Mr. Stewart, Andy Stewart, because he didn't like that Mr. Stewart was of Jewish heritage. Okay, I'm cleaning it up because what it was said was that he was a Jew, and it sounds like derogatory to me. You know what I'm saying? That's it. He meant it derogatory. Okay, so we know that she has this perfectionist nature, and it started with him. And she says she was the ideal daughter. These are the things that bothered me. Listening to it the second time, I was like, "Oh, Martha, that's not good. That's not good." And she feels like, although she was all the ideal daughter, her dad was like the handsomest dad. She said he was a failure at his job. So then we also, yeah. So yes, Martha's house was not lovey dovey. And that also led to her kind of being and feeling disconnected from her daughter. Like, people said that it seemed like she didn't want to be a mom, or she couldn't wait for her daughter to go down for a nap, because Martha was young when she had her baby. She was like in her early 20s when she had her child. So she was still trying to figure out her life. So then, I need to stop smacking, because the dad loses his job and is teaching them how to plant and cultivate the land and having all their produce from the ground, and the mom is still working, trying to feed her family and making all these meals, right? Martha, in her late teens, starts modeling, and Martha gives the modeling money to her mom. So up until this point, I was like, if you come from a house that is not so lovey-dovey, right? And you already might feel a little bit disconnected from your mom, then wouldn't your dad maybe be like your primary person? And wouldn't you try and do everything in your power to be as unproblematic for this person so that they love you? And I feel like she was put in a very weird position to help the family out financially, which I feel like might have caused a complex in Martha moving forward. Okay. This is all me just watching. Okay. I don't know nothing about Martha's life, but this is just what I'm seeing. It feels like Martha then developed a complex very early because your mom is at the job and taking care of the kids. Is she taking care of you specifically? No, she's just trying to make ends meet. And your dad is not doing anything, it would seem. He's not working, right? So then you have to step into that role to be the provider. And she kind of just steps into that role for her whole life, everywhere, all the time, moving forward. But I digress. So Martha becomes a model, $15 an hour to help out her family. Okay. She was doing great things. So then Martha goes to college because Martha gets a scholarship. So Martha starts in this, like, not so well off, but probably middle class family in New Jersey, gets a scholarship and gets to this prestigious, I forget the name of it, college. And she meets Andy Stewart. Andy Stewart his sister gets driven to school in a Rolls Royce. Andy Stewart himself goes to Yale and has a yellow Mercedes and an American Express card, girl. So she was like, I felt I was in love by the end of our first date. And I was like, Martha, this is the only man that ever came to take care of you. Your dad couldn't even take care of you. This was the person that provided for her. She was like, oh, he would send me money to take the train or whatever up all the time to see him. I'm like, yeah. So he was able to provide for you financially, is the thing that you were missing in your youth. And you're still young. The thing that you were missing, you were like, oh, he can provide, so he's a good catch. Well, after all that, they get married, girl. And what I did realize is that her husband provided her access to a better life. He definitely provided her access because Martha said she didn't want to stick around for the cookie cutter life that her mom and dad were doing. But I feel like she still recreated that anyway, trying to be perfectly perfect and a good thing. You know what I'm saying? I digress again. So her and her man, her new husband, Andy, they go on a 5-month European tour. And Martha's just eating and traveling and having a good old time. I'm like, that's not normal for everybody at a young age. So again, he provided her access to the finer things. Okay. So throughout this traveling, that's where she's exposed to cuisine and culture, and falls in love with just the finer things and learning recipes and how things are prepared. And then she has to come home. And she comes home and automatically starts becoming a mom and is doing that, but doesn't seem very happy. So then all of a sudden, she's like, well, maybe I could try my hand at being a stockbroker. Why? Because her father in law is also a stockbroker. Access. So she does that, does very well at that job, and is doing really well, making lots of money until one of their decisions tanks for the customers and she quits. Then her and her man pick up with the baby and go to Connecticut and buy a fixer upper. And she fixed up the house. And really, she says that's where Martha Stewart living was born because she had to fix up the house how she wanted it. They had chickens, they had uh, uh, a garden, and she would use this house to entertain. Hmm. She would use his house to entertain. So while she's entertaining, she's cooking all these grand meals. She loves to do this thing. And then they're like, oh, you should just make a catering company. So that's what she does. Catering company is very successful, makes lots of money. So we've gone from a model to a stockbroker to a caterer that makes lots of money. Then at an event that her husband, who is like a publisher or something, or a CEO of a publishing company, a party that she is catering that he's at that was for his worker or whatever, his business, somebody's like, hey, you should just do a cookbook. Bob's your uncle. Now Martha got a cookbook. How can life work for somebody this way? But it worked for Martha. So she got a cookbook and she continues on working. But then we find out that Andy, Mr. Stewart, Mr. Stewart is cheating on her. And we find out that Mr. Stewart just be cheating all over the place, right? And Martha's not very happy about that and doesn't really want to talk about the situation. But I find it interesting that we talked about Mr. Stewart's infidelity, but the interviewer brought up two specific instances about Martha cheating on her man. Martha cheated on her honeymoon by kissing a man in a cathedral, and she was like, that was nothing. She said she cheated with an Irish man at the when she was a stockbroker. And she said that was nothing to break up a marriage about. And her husband, Mr. Stewart, didn't even know about that. And the interviewer was like, yeah, he does. And he said that after he learned about your infidelities, that's when he started cheating. And she was like, no, I doubt he knows about that. I was like, Martha, you don't have no accountability. What's going on? What's going on? Everything that comes to besmirch her name, she's like, that's not, it didn't happen. It's fine. It wasn't anything big. You wouldn't break up a marriage about it. It wasn't an infidelity. I was just, it was an emotional time. I wish anybody could have that moment. All right, Martha, if that's what you say. So back to Mr. Stewart. So Mr. Stewart cheating all over the place, and then he ends up cheating with the help at Martha's home. And she was like, oh my God. So she kicked the girl out. Boom. Gone. Gone. So while Martha's trying to build an empire, after 27 years of marriage, they break up, which came at a really inconvenient time because she was going to an event to talk about weddings. um, and she was really upset about that. She was like, oh, I didn't choose to end the marriage. He did. But it seemed like at some point their marriage turned more into a business relationship because he like managed her deals and stuff. And like I said, she got a lot of her hookups through his connection. She had a lot of access through his business and the people that he could bring in. Mm, mm, mm. So she continues working and she says she throws herself into work. And then all of a sudden she has a deal with Kmart. She's got more books. She's got more magazines. She's got more shows. And it's just more Martha, It's more Martha. um, So, like I said, Martha was brushing off a lot during this whole situation and didn't really take accountability for much. Yeah, for much, including her legal troubles. Okay. So we hear that her legal or her financial advisor person calls her and is like, hey, the stocks are about to not do well. And she was like, all right, cool, sell it. Boom. The conversation was over. She says it was a short conversation. But by the time the higher ups, the government finds out about it, she's like, oh, I don't recall. I don't really know. Like, I don't recall about that moment in time. I don't really recall. She said it was a short conversation. Now she can say that. But at the time, she told them she didn't recall. So she maintains that she didn't know it was insider trading. And ultimately, they couldn't catch her for that, but they caught her for lying. For lying because one of her close friends came up on the stand who was there that day and told them about what she actually said. Okay. So Martha didn't think the lady was going to tell her business, but she did, and Martha got put in jailhouse. She got the felon experience and was sent to, they called it Camp Cupcake, but it was a prison. She got sent there for 5 months. Mm. I don't even want to spend 1 month, so, and I don't even know. So that's where Martha got sent, girl. And like I said, I remember that very vividly, all that hoopla around her going to jail. I'm trying to figure out how old I was. I can't remember what year it was anyway. So, Miss Perfect, the woman who has built her life on perfection and being perfectly perfect, is now going to jail. And her image is tarnished and her business plummets. And by the time she comes out after the 5 months, it was only 5 months, but her business suffered greatly. So, everything she had built up to that time just tanked. And it's unfortunate. She does not like to talk about it. And I guess I wouldn't like to talk about it either, honestly. Um, and do you know that Martha had a boyfriend during that time? This was Martha's 15-year relationship. Martha had a boyfriend. He only visited her one time. I was like, Martha. And she was like, well, he was off traveling and, in his boat, I doubt he wanted to spend time around somebody like me. So when it was time for her to leave, he sent his jet to pick her up. And that's how she left. But then later on, I'm going to read it directly from this. Okay, later on, it said, he broke up with her in bed and told her he was going to marry Lisa. Who is Lisa? And that Lisa's parents didn't want him to talk to Martha anymore. I was like, in bed. Oh, after a 15-year relationship, I would have been seething. So then Martha was like, well, there was another divorce because they've been together for so long. And I was like, oh my God. So there are these moments of like little failures, but then she has like these big failures on top of it. And she's not somebody that likes to experience failure, you know? So yes, girl, he broke up with her. And I was like, I couldn't even. So Martha, after 5 months, she jumps right back into working and she starts the Martha show, but she wasn't in control of it because she's a felon. So they wouldn't let her hold any like control over like the things to do, the CEO position. And nobody really liked that. So again, the business, her whole situation got sold. And then in 2015, she pops back up on the Justin Bieber roast. I didn't even remember this part. She sure does. And don't you know that's where she met Snoop Dogg, at the Justin Bieber roast? And it's been bliss ever since, as we see. And Martha continues to remain relevant. I like that Martha has become less prudish. Well, it don't really seem like she was a prude, It doesn't seem like she was a prude, but she has a less sanitized image as time goes on. But she's also older, so she has less to prove and all the bad things that have happened already. What else? What else can there be? What else can we judge her for? So now she can kind of live her life. Um, So the main things I see, it seems like she has a lack of accountability in some places, like the infidelity and the insider trading. And she doesn't want to fess up to those or like call them what they actually are for some reason. And maybe it goes against her image, of like not really ever doing that. And there was one part in there when she was like, the interviewer was like, do you ever talk about your feelings like in a relationship? And she was like, oh, well, maybe that's why I don't have that many male relationships, because basically nobody has time for that. And I was like, Martha, I don't it feels like she never trusted a man to fully take care of her. Like, although her husband, she still built her own while in the marriage, and it seems like built her own without him. Um, so it's like, I don't know. I'm like, do you ever trust anybody to help you, to like care for you in that way, or are you just kind of like plow through life? It feels like she plows through life. Um, And I don't know. I don't know. I just kind of feel bad for Martha a little bit. I feel bad for the emotional parts of Martha. I think obviously she's a great businesswoman, excels at everything she does. But I also wonder what pushes her to do that, what fuels that. Like, and the people call her angry. I'm like, is she just anxious or is she mean? Like, these are the things I want to know about Martha. If she does have a bug, and if I do end up reading it, I'll maybe come back and give a little tidbit. If you watch the Martha interview, how did you like it? What did you think? What were your assessments? Okay. Goodbye.